All of you can see the screen. Yeah, perfect. Let's get started.
Which is ingress. The another important topic in the Kubernetes, that is ingress. Ingress is a Kubernetes component, Kubernetes object. It is used to map external URLs to Kubernetes cluster services. What is the main purpose of ingress? Ingress is used for URLs mapping in the Kubernetes cluster. Ingress is used to map external URLs to Kubernetes cluster services, right? So in the Kubernetes, we are running our applications using pods. Pods are accessible within the cluster. How we are exposing the pod outside the cluster? Do you guys have any idea? When we run the pods are accessible. Pods are accessible within cluster. Pods are accessible within cluster. To expose pods outside the cluster, we are
Node
using
port service.
service concept. We are using service concept. How many types of services available in the Kubernetes?
3.
We have 3 types of services in the Kubernetes. We have 3 types of services in Kubernetes. Can you guys tell me what are those 3 services?
Cluster IP.
Cluster IP.
Load
First one is cluster IP. Second one is node port. And the third one is load balancer.
Load balancer.
Third one is load balancer. Can you tell me the difference between cluster IP, node port, and load balancer?
Using cluster IP, we can communicate in cluster.
Within the cluster.
Within the cluster. Yeah. And using node port, we can access outside the cluster and inside the cluster also.
Right. Load balancer.
Using load balancer, we can create multiple replicas.
And a DNS name will be generated to access inside the cluster as well as outside the cluster. Now, right. So here we are running our application on the Kubernetes cluster by using pods. Our application can have multiple pods. So in the pod, we are going to run the containers. Those pods are accessible within the cluster by using pod IP. So if you want to expose the pods outside the cluster, then we are using Kubernetes service concept. Kubernetes service concept is used to expose the pods within the cluster as well as outside the cluster. Kubernetes service is divided into 3 types. One is a cluster IP service, second one is node port service, and the third one is load balancer service. Already we have experimented with cluster IP and node port. Cluster IP, when we use a cluster IP, it will generate one virtual IP for our service. Using that virtual IP, we can access the service within the cluster. We can access the pods within the cluster. If you want to expose your pods outside the cluster also for public users, then we need to go for node port service. When we use node port service, using any node machine in the cluster, using any node IP in the cluster, we can access one random port number will be generated for that. Okay, now what will happen when we go for LBR? Guys, LBR, if you use the LBR in the self-managed cluster, you can't see the real power of the LBR. Okay, now let me deploy one application on the EKS cluster with the LBR and let us see what is going to happen. Now let's go to our AWS account. We created our EKS cluster in the Mumbai region and we have 2 worker nodes and there is one client machine. I connected to my client machine, which is used to execute my kubectl commands. So let us see kubectl get nodes. Can you tell me how many nodes are available in my cluster? How many nodes are available in my cluster currently? There are 2 nodes available in my cluster. These are worker nodes. Do we have any control on the control plane?
No.
Can we manage the control plane in the EKS?
No.
No. Who will manage control plane in the
AWS.
EKS? AWS. Completely it is managed by AWS. Okay. kubectl get pods. kubectl get pods. So do we have any pods in the default
No.
namespace currently? Currently there are no pods available. Can I deploy one pod and can I expose that pod using a service as a load balancer now?
Yes.
Right. I'm going to take one application, Java web application deploy service.yml. Java web application deployment I'm taking. So pod specification I'm giving as a deployment. For this I'm giving the name as a Java web app deployment, right? And match labels I'm giving, image I'm giving as Ashok IT Java web app. This is my pod specification. This is my pod specification. I'm creating a pod by using deployment strategy. Replicas I'm giving as only one. Very good. Now I want to expose this pod outside the cluster. To expose the pod outside the cluster, I have a service. Service type I am using as load balancer. Okay. Let me go here. Let me create this YML. Okay. Right. So let me remove all these things. Java web app deploy warm, RM Maven web app deploy VM. All these things I am deleting. Okay. Now VI, I'm creating Java web app.yml. I'm creating Java web app.yml. In this, I'm creating the pod. The pod is exposing by using load balancer service. Guys, before going to do this pod execution, can you check in my AWS account, do I have any load balancers? Guys, do I have any load balancers in the Mumbai region currently?
No.
No, I don't have any load balancer in the Mumbai region. Now, I am creating a service. I'm creating a service with a type as what? What is the type I am using to create my service now?
Load balancer.
Load balancer I'm using. Very good. Now, can you schedule this pod? Can we schedule this pod by using cluster? Yep. kubectl apply -f java web app.yml. Okay, my deployment got created. One pod is created by using deployment strategy. The pod is exposed by using a service called a load balancer service. Can you see one load balancer got created?
Yes.
Did I create this load balancer manually or Kubernetes cluster created this load balancer?
Kubernetes cluster.
Kubernetes cluster created this load balancer. Why Kubernetes cluster created a load balancer in the AWS? Why it created a load balancer in the AWS? Come on, guys.
To distribute the load, to distribute.
No, not for distributing the load. We used the service type as a load balancer. We used the service type as a load balancer. So whenever we use service type as a cluster IP, one virtual IP will be generated. When we use a node port, it will use the one port number, random port number. Using any IP of the node machine, we can do that. When we use a load balancer, one AWS load balancer is creating. In that load balancer, two instances, two worker nodes are associated. Now, how to access this application now? So my application is running. So let us see this application kubectl get a service. Service is running. Now this service is running in the Kubernetes cluster. What is the type of the service? Service type is a load balancer. So for load balancer, one URL got generated. Port number 31736 random port number, node port it has taken and it binded to 80. Now, in order to access this application, can I use the DNS of the load balancer which is created now? Can I use the DNS of the load balancer which is created now? Come on, guys.
Yes.
Yes, I can use the DNS of the load balancer which is created here. So here it is the load balancer URL. I'm trying to hit the load balancer URL. When I hit the load balancer URL, what is coming? Tomcat. It is mapped to 80 port number. If you see, the load balancer is listening on what port number? 80. So the load balancer 80 port number is mapped to which node port? 31736. Actual our application is running on the node port to 31736. Node port to 31736 is mapped to 80 port number. Our load balancer also listening to 80 port number. Now let's access our application by using context path. Java web app. Java web app. Are we able to access our application by using context path now?
Yes.
You can click on the URL also. You can try that. Can you click on the URL and can you tell me, is it accessible for you or not? It is accessible. How I deployed my application in the EKS cluster? How I deployed my application in the EKS cluster now?
Load balancer type.
By using a service type as a load balancer. So when I use service type as a load balancer, what is happening internally?
It will create one load balancer with
In the
DNS.
AWS.
Yeah.
Are you clear with my point? It is creating one application load balancer in the AWS. So when we access that AWS load balancer URL, it is redirecting the traffic to the service which is running in the Kubernetes cluster. Are you clear? Are you guys clear with this?
Yes, sir.
Now, can I give this URL to the public to access my application?
Yes.
Can I give this URL to the public to access my application?
Yes, sir.
Can I give this lengthy URL?
No, no.
No.
Can people remember this URL?
No.
No.
People cannot remember this
Node
URL.
53.
Yeah,
Node
people
53.
cannot remember this URL. Okay. So with this, are you clear how to deploy a service in the EKS cluster by using 3 types of services? Cluster IP, node port, and LBR. Cluster IP, it can be accessed within the cluster. Node port means one port number, node machine IP address you can use to access. When we use LBR, so when you use LBR in the AWS, we are creating the EKS cluster in the AWS platform. So AWS load balancer created to access our application. Very good. Fine. Guys, for example, how many worker nodes are running now? Currently, how many worker nodes are running now?
2 worker nodes.
2 worker nodes are running. Can you check the status? kubectl get pods. How many pods are running?
1.
Only 1 pod is running. How many nodes are running? How many nodes are running?
2.
2 nodes are running. Now let's see here. I am going to this. I am stopping 1 node manually. I have stopped 1 node manually. Okay. Now let's check it. kubectl get nodes. kubectl get nodes. I have stopped 1 node manually. So let's check what is going to happen. So if I stop 1 node, I mean, if any node got dead, then what will happen, guys?
Recreate.
Who is responsible to create that?
Controller.
Controller.
We are responsible. See here, ready, scheduling disabled. Scheduling disabled. That node is ready, but scheduling is disabled because that node got stopped. That node got stopped. In place of that node, Kubernetes cluster is going to take 1 more node. It is going to take 1 more node. So we created auto scaling group for the worker nodes. We created auto scaling group for the worker. Can you see here? 3rd node came.
Yes.
Can you see the 3rd node came?
Yes.
Yes. Now, earlier I have given the minimum capacity as 2. So 2 worker nodes are running. 1 worker node I have stopped intentionally.
Yes.
When I stop
maximum.
1 worker node, in place of that, other worker node is started or not? Just 12 seconds ago,
Yes.
other worker node is started or not?
Yes.
Yes. Now 2 worker nodes are ready. Yeah, who is take if any worker node in the cluster, if any worker node is unhealthy, or if any worker node is crashed, if any worker node got failed, do we need to start another worker node, or it will be taken care by our cluster?
Our cluster.
Our cluster is going to take care of this
Okay.
process. So can I say it is a self-healing capability?
Yes.
Yes.
Can we call it as a self-healing capability? Yes.
Yes.
One worker node I have started, I have stopped intentionally. Now it created another worker node. It created another worker node. Very good. Fine, guys. So today we have only one application and we are running that application as a load balancer. Okay, now for our application, load balancer
Hello,
load balancer is having a DNS.
sir. One doubt.
One second. Load balancer is available. Load balancer is having a DNS. So is it recommended to share the DNS URL to the people to access our application?
No.
No, sir.
Is it recommended to share this DNS URL for the people to access our application? No. Then what we need to do? We need to map this DNS to our
Route
domain name.
53. Yeah.
So which service is available to map our DNS to the domain name? Route 53 service is available. So in the Route 53, already I have purchased one domain. Using that domain, I'm going to map this domain name to my load balancer URL. So there is one hosted zone available, ashokit.org, domain is available. Let me create a record. Let me create a record, alias, choose the endpoint, load balancer. In the Mumbai region, it created. Choose the load balancer type. Yes, I have selected. I'm not giving any subdomain. Click on create record. Click on create record. View the status. Let's wait. Let's wait. The status should come to available state. Then our domain name is mapped to load balancer URL. Now when we access our domain name, the request should go to our load balancer. Actually our application is running where our application is running, guys? Where our application is running currently? Can I say my application is running in the Kubernetes cluster? Can I say my application is running in the Kubernetes cluster? Come on, guys,
Yes.
speak out. My application is running in the Kubernetes cluster. So which service I use to expose this application outside the cluster? Load balancer.
Load balancer.
Balancer.
I use a load balancer. So it created one load balancer in the AWS cloud. Using load balancer DNS, we can access our application. But is it easy to remember the DNS name?
No.
Is
No.
it easy to remember the DNS name?
No.
It is not easy to remember the DNS name. That's why I mapped my application to domain name. Now can you see ashokit.org/Java web app. So is it mapped to my domain name now?
Yes.
Can you hit this URL and can you see application is accessible or not? Can you hit this URL and can you see application is accessible or not?
Accessible, sir.
Accessible. So with this, we are able to run our application on the Kubernetes cluster by using load balancer service. That load balancer we are able to map to our domain name by using Route 53. Okay, this is fine. Today, how many applications are running in the Kubernetes cluster? How many applications we are running in the Kubernetes cluster?
One.
One.
application.
One application.
One application is running in the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, can we run in the real time? Our application is a monolith. Our application is a microservices.
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 That means one application will run in the cluster. Multiple applications will run in the cluster.
Multiple applications.
Multiple applications will be running in the cluster. Okay, now let me show you how to run one more application in the cluster. Okay, I am going to take one more application, guys. This is a another Java application. I'm naming this application as a Maven web app. Here you see the domain name, the image name got changed. Previously, the image name is Ashok IT Java web app. Now the image name is Ashok IT Maven web app. I'm just using a different image to deploy my service. Okay. VI Maven web app.yml. VI Maven web app.yml. So what is the service type I'm using? What is the service type I'm using? Load
Load
balancer.
Balancer.
Load balancer. Okay. Now, before going to apply this service, kubectl get svc. Currently, how many services are running now? One service is running. One service. This is default service Kubernetes.
Okay.
So how many services are running now?
One.
Java web app service is running. Now I want to run one more application in the cluster. For that, I have created a manifest file. kubectl apply -f maven web app.yml. Now I have scheduled one more service. Okay, let's check it. Now can you see Java web app service is running, and can you see Maven web app service is also running?
Yes.
Yes.
Java web app service is running, Maven web app service is also running. Now, so both services, both are two different services, both are using load balancer. Now go to our AWS, check the load balancers. Now, one load balancer will be available, two load balancers will be available now. One load balancer or two load balancers?
Two load.
Two load balancers. Why there are two load balancers are available?
Different application.
Yes, so we are running two applications in the AWS cloud using load balancer. For first application, one load balancer created. For second application, one more load balancer got created. Now let's access second application also by using DNS. Let's access second application also by using DNS. So this is the DNS name. This application name I have given as Maven web app. Let's try to access the second application by using DNS. So are you able to access second application also?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Now let's go to first application once. First application is already mapped to domain name ashokit.org/Java web app. ashokit.org Java web app is one service. This Maven web app is another service. Are you guys clear with my point?
Yes.
Am
sir.
I able
Yes.
to run two applications in the cluster?
Yes.
Yes.
Am I able to run two applications in the cluster?
Yes.
Yes, I'm able to run the two applications in the cluster. But tomorrow, when you go for your real project, only two applications will be available, or there can be multiple applications available.
Multiple applications.
Multiple applications can be available. So now let me call it as a service one. Let me call this as one service which you are creating in the Kubernetes. Let's call this as one service in the Kubernetes. Can one service have multiple pods, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Can one service have multiple pods?
Yes.
Yes, one service can have multiple pods. So currently I am running two services in the Kubernetes cluster. In the real time, 10 services also can be available for our application. So there is a pod for this first service, and it is having two pods. Assume that this service is having two pods. So similarly, there is another service available in the cluster. There is another service available in the cluster. So total, how many services I am running in my cluster?
3.
3 services I am running in my cluster. Assume that I am using load balancer to run these services. Assume that I am using load balancer to run these services. So how many load balancers will be created now?
3.
Three.
How many load balancers will be created now? 3 load balancers will be created. So can we give multiple URLs to the people to access our application?
No.
Or we should use single URL to access our application?
Single
Single
URL.
URL.
We need to give the single URL to access our application. Okay. So in order to give the single URL to access our application, here we are using node port. When we use a node port, what is happening when I use a node port, guys? What is going to happen when we use a node port?
The URL will be accessible only within the cluster.
Node port.
Node port
Sorry.
outside the cluster. Inside the
Node
cluster,
port
outside.
means it is accessible outside the cluster. So can we expose our services URLs to the public people directly?
No.
Can we expose our services to the public users directly?
No.
No. We should not expose our public URLs to the people directly. Now, I am going to run this service as a cluster IP only because they should be accessible only within the cluster. If I run these three services as a node port service or as a load balancer service, what is the problem? What is the problem? Come on, guys.
Public
They
know the
can access
URL.
our service.
People will access the services. Public users can access our services. So is it recommended to expose, or now your project having 100 services, guys? Your project is having 100 services. Are you going to expose all the 100 services for the public access directly? Can they
No.
access your
No.
service?
No.
No.
So now here I am going to create a domain. Here my domain will be available. Here my domain will be available. Whenever request comes to the domain, now based on the URL pattern, I need to route the request to particular service. For that, I'm going to use ingress. What is the concept of ingress now? Ingress is used to map external URLs to your services which are running in the Kubernetes cluster. So now you understand where we are going to use ingress in the Kubernetes?
Yes, sir.
Where we are going to use ingress in the Kubernetes?
As a route table?
Exactly. Ingress is used to route the traffic to the services which are running in the Kubernetes cluster. Now, how we are going to run the services in the cluster? Are we going to run the services as a node port services, or we will run the services as a cluster IP only?
Cluster IP only.
Cluster IP only. Why we are running the services as a cluster IP services?
We don't want to allow outsiders to
Ah,
access our services.
Exactly. We don't want to allow the outside people to access our services directly. Now, can you give a door for the bedroom? Directly people can come into your bedroom, or you need to allow the people from the main gate?
Main gate.
Main gate. Ingress is going to act as a main gate for the Kubernetes cluster services. Are you guys getting my point? So we are going to run multiple services in the Kubernetes. Multiple services means multiple microservices will be available. So for every microservice, we will create one service in the Kubernetes, and in that service, multiple pods will be available. But we don't want the public users to access our Kubernetes services directly. Public users should access our application from a domain. Whenever a request comes from the domain, so that request is coming to service 1 or service 2 or service 3, that based on the URL, I will map it. So to map the URL pattern to the particular service in the Kubernetes, we are going to use ingress concept. That means what traffic can come inside the cluster, that request should go to which service in the Kubernetes will be decided by ingress network. You understand my point? Now you see, if you go to Flipkart, now guys, what is happening when you go for Flipkart? If you click on grocery, now it is displaying grocery data. If you click on personal baby care soaps, it is displaying soaps data. Got it? If you go for household, papers, basic electricals, batteries, if you click on that, it is displaying only batteries. So here, that means multiple services are available. Based on the request, it is changing. If I select fruits and vegetables, no results are available. no results are available. So if I go for snacks, juices, so some data it is coming. So based on user request, the output is changing. Got my point? So
Yes, sir.
when the user clicks something, then the request should go to a particular service in the Kubernetes cluster. So how to map user request to particular service in the Kubernetes? Who will map the URLs to the services in the Kubernetes, guys?
Ingress.
Ingress we are going to use. Now you understand the purpose of ingress?
Yes, sir.
In our cluster, multiple services will be available. Ingress in Kubernetes. Okay, now let us see official documentation. Ingress is an API object that manages external access to the services in a cluster, typically HTTP. Okay, so external services are available in the cluster. These services are cluster IP services. I don't want the people to access my services outside the cluster. But how to map outside traffic to my services? So between the services and the public users, Ingress will act as a mediator. Ingress is going to act as a mediator between the user request and cluster services. Got it? So Ingress is an API object that manages external access to the servers in a cluster, typically HTTP requests. Now let us see what is this ingress terminology. Node, cluster, router, cluster network will be available. Now can you see what is this ingress? What is this ingress is doing here? Ingress is talking to a routing rule service. Service can have pods. So currently they are showing one service in the cluster, but in future we can have multiple services in the cluster. Okay, one service can have multiple pods also. When a client make a request, the request should come to ingress. Ingress should understand this request should go to which service, that routing should happen. Are you guys clear with my point? What is ingress now? Are you guys clear with my point? What is ingress now?
Yes.
Ingress is used to map external URLs to Kubernetes cluster services. Pods are accessible within the cluster. To expose the pods outside the cluster, we are using services concept. We have three types of services in the Kubernetes. One is a cluster IP, second one is node port, third one is LBR. When we use a cluster IP, services are accessible within the cluster. When you use a node port, services are accessible outside the cluster using node IP. When you go for LBR, AWS LBR is creating, using that we can access our application. But the thing is, if you are running one service, then no problem. But are we going to run only one service in the cluster for our project, or our project will have multiple services?
Multiple services.
Our project will have multiple services. Can we give all these services URLs to the people to access directly?
No.
No. So we need to manage that traffic. So we need to configure the routings. For which request, which service should be executed, that will be managed by ingress. Are you guys clear now? So can I show you how to route the traffic to these two services which I have created in the cluster now?
Yes.
Very good. Now I need to delete these two services, guys. kubectl delete all -all. Why I am deleting? Currently the services are running on what type? Currently my services are
Load
running on what
balancer.
type?
Load
Load
balancer.
Services
balancer
are
type.
running on load balancer type.
We need
So,
one cluster ID.
We need cluster
now
IP.
how we need to run the services now?
Cluster
We need to
ID.
run the services on the cluster
Cluster.
IP.
Oh.
Now I am deleting all the pods and all the services which are created here. Let's go to our EC2 load balancer. Check it. Load balancers are available or they have deleted?
Deleted.
Deleted.
Who deleted? Did I delete those load balancers? Or EKS cluster deleted the load balancer?
EKS.
EKS cluster deleted the load balancer. Why the EKS cluster deleted the load balancer? Because I have deleted all my objects. I have deleted all my objects. Now, clear. kubectl get SVC. Our two services got deleted, only default service is available. kubectl get pods. There are no pods are available. Now, can I execute these pods by using cluster IP service now? Can I execute
sir.
these pods by using cluster IP service now?
Yes.
Yes. Let me edit them. Java web app.yml. Let me go here. Let me give the type as a cluster IP. Let me give the type as a cluster IP. Okay. Fine. Similarly, vi maven web app.yml. For this also, I'm going to give the type as a cluster IP. Guys, I'm covering a real project scenario. Right. Now I have changed both YML files using cluster IP. Let's run the services now. Let's run the services now. kubectl apply -f java web app.yml. One service is created. kubectl apply -f maven web app.yml. Second service also created. Clear. kubectl get svc. How many services are running?
3.
3.
3. Out of 3, how many services are user defined services?
2.
2.
2. What are those services? What are those services now?
Java web app, Maven web app.
Maven web app.
Java web app and maven web app. So what is the type of the service here?
Cluster IP.
Cluster IP.
Cluster
What
IP.
is the type of the service here? The
Cluster
type
IP.
of the service is cluster IP. Now, can we access them outside the cluster?
No.
No, we cannot access them outside the cluster. Now what I need to do here for these two services, I need to configure ingress. I need to configure ingress. Why we are going to configure ingress?
We want to route the
Outside.
traffic towards the
Traffic.
services from outside.
Exactly. We want to route the traffic from outside to the services. Services are accessible only within the cluster. From outside, whatever the traffic is coming, that a traffic we should map to these services by using ingress. Got it? So first we need to run ingress controller in our Kubernetes cluster. Now by using that ingress controller, I can run the ingress rules. Okay. So currently we need to set the ingress. We need to set the ingress. Okay, guys. Now, in order to set the ingress, there is a setup, guys. So I'm going to give you that setup. So if you go to our github.com, I have created one repository for you. Using that repository, you can set up the ingress. So there is a repository called Kubernetes ingress. So there are several components available in the ingress. So let's clone this repository in our account. ls-l. Yeah, Kubernetes ingress. I have already done the cloning of that. So you guys need to do cloning. Git to clone this repository URL. You need to clone, guys. Git clone this repository. In this repository, I kept all the files which are required to set up the ingress. Directly, you cannot write the ingress rules. First, you need to set up the ingress on the cluster. So to set up that ingress on the cluster, I have given some files in the repository. Okay.
Hello, sir.
First you need to clone this Git repository.
Hello.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Actually, I want to ask one question. Here
Yeah,
you
tell
are giving the some GitHub URL, right?
Yeah.
You only written all the YAML files in that?
No, sir. Those are downloaded from the official website of the Kubernetes.
Can you tell where from where you are?
Yes, sir. I will show you. I will share the link also. Okay. What YAML you are asking? You are asking about these YAMLs which I have created: Java web app, Maven web app.
No. I'm not asking this one. You just put one repository URL in that some YAML files are there.
Right. I will show you that also. Okay. So this is a GitHub repository. In this GitHub repository, some YAML files will be available. Common is available. There are some YAML files available. And
I'm
here,
asking about these files only.
Yes, sir. I got it, sir. So daemon set YAMLs are available. Deployment YAML file is available. Service related YAML file is available. So all these YAML files are required to set up ingress in our cluster. Okay. Now here I have given the detailed document how to set up ingress in our cluster. You need to clone this GitHub repository. Once you have cloned this GitHub repository, you go to that directory. So now here GitHub repository is already cloned, Kubernetes ingress, cd space Kubernetes ingress. Once you go to that directory, there you can see some subdirectories, common directory, daemon set directory, deployment directory, service directory. So ingress can be installed in two ways. One is by using daemon set, or another one is by using deployment. Both are not required. Either a daemon set or a deployment strategy we can use to deploy ingress in our cluster. Okay, so first we are going to create a namespace. So to create the namespace, so there is a file ns and sa yaml file is available. In the common, there is a file ns and sa.yaml. Using that yaml, you can create a namespace to set up our ingress. So just to follow these commands. So git clone this repository, then go inside the directory which you have cloned, then create the namespace by using this command. Then you can see all the files which are available here. Then after, you are going to create a RBAC. Basically RBAC is used to manage the roles. Okay, so we are going to create the role based access by using RBAC for our ingress. So once we have created this RBAC, now we need to deploy our ingress, right? So three steps we have done. First one is cloning the repository, then creating a namespace, then creating a RBAC. Once the RBAC creation is also completed, then we need to deploy our ingress controller. We have two options to deploy the ingress controller. One is a deployment, second one is a daemon set. I'm going to deploy the ingress by using daemon set approach. Okay, so if you just execute this command, kubectl apply -f daemon set nginx ingress.yaml, then nginx controller will be installed in our cluster. Nginx controller will be installed in our cluster. Once Nginx got installed, now you can check the objects of Nginx by using the namespace. We already created a namespace for the Nginx by using this namespace YML. So in that namespace, what all the objects of Nginx, what all the objects of this ingress is running, we can check it by using this. Okay, so once it is done, we are going to create a load balancer service for this ingress. Okay, we are going to create a load balancer for our ingress. Done. So the load balancer got created for ingress. Now let's go to AWS, see the load balancers. AWS target groups, AWS load balancers. AWS load balancers. Let's wait. Currently, we don't have any load balancers. So I have created kubectl apply service load balancer AWS elb.yaml. One load balancer it is going to create, which is required for our ingress controller. Okay, let's wait for that. Now, so we are going to take this kubectl apply service load balancer AWS elb.yaml. It is going to generate a LBR with a DNS. It is going to generate a LBR with the DNS. Let me go to EC2 load balancer. Still not generated. kubectl apply service load balancer AWS elb.yaml. Why it is taking time? One load balancer will be created for this, guys. Once the load balancer is created, we can map our services to the domain using this ingress. By using ingress, we can map it. So we can map using multiple hosts. For one application, I can use one host. For another application, I can use another host. That is a multi-host DNS concept is available. I'm waiting for the load balancer to be created.
Sir, what is meaning of -f, sir, in the command you are giving -f?
File name.
File name, okay. -n meaning
-n, where I gave the -n.
while checking
Here
the
-n means namespace.
namespace. Okay. File.
kubectl apply -f inside the service directory load balancer ELB available. It should create one load balancer, but I don't understand why it's not created yet. Instances. So 2 worker nodes are running. 1 client machine is running in the EC2 dashboard. Load balancers. Ingress load balancer should be created, guys. Let me do the setup of this once again. Git clone. Yeah, repository got cloned. Go to this. Already I'm inside that directory. Then let's try to create a namespace. Namespace got created. Then let's create kubectl apply -f common. Namespace also created. Now kubectl apply this nginx. Nginx I have created by using daemon set. kubectl get all -nginx ingress. Now nginx ingress is running now. So this is the external IP that is having. Then create a load balancer for this. It is saying that load balancer is unchanged. We don't have any load balancer. One load balancer should be created.
Sir, we have given type is cluster IP, right? It will create load balancer for the cluster
No.
IP.
That is not for service. I'm telling you
Okay, this one. Okay,
for
sir.
ingress,
Yeah,
there
ingress.
should be one load balancer.
Okay.
Create a load balancer service for ingress. kubectl all -n nginx ingress. It is running here. Service nginx ingress unchanged. kubectl apply -f service load balancer aws elb dot yaml. Service nginx ingress unchanged. kubectl apply, kubectl get svc maven web app kubernetes java web app service is there. kubectl get all java web application is running. Pods are running. 2 services also running. 2 deployments also running. Replica sets also running. Why the nginx is not running that? Service nginx, it is displaying as running. This is the load balancer name it is showing. 1 second. Let me go to my Route 53. Hosted zones, domain name. Let me create a record. Load balancer not created. Yes, let me try delete this service and try once again. kubectl delete. Nginx service, it is not able to find out that. kubectl delete namespace nginx ingress. I'm deleting that namespace. So when we delete the namespace, all the objects which are associated to that namespace also will be deleted. Yeah, namespace got deleted. Now kubectl get svc. Our services are running. kubectl get all -n nginx ingress. That namespace itself is not available. Now let me try to create a namespace again. kubectl apply. Namespace got created. Let me create role. Then we need to deploy our ingress by using nginx. I'm doing that deployment. Deployment got created. Get all the information which are available under that namespace. Nginx namespace is running now. Then let us create a load balancer. Now service got created. Let's go to EC2. Check the load balancer. Perfect. Now, can we see the load balancer got created for Nginx?
What is the issue, sir, previously?
Yeah, the issue was, so previously I have already created that Nginx. That's why it was not created the new Nginx. I have deleted that. The load balancer I have deleted, but in the Kubernetes cluster, it is saying that service is already created. So it is not creating the new load balancer. When I ran this ingress today morning, one load balancer got created. I have deleted that load balancer manually. But in the cluster, what it is understanding that the service is already running. It is thinking that load balancer is already created. Okay. Now we are able to set up the ingress, guys. We are able to set up the ingress. Just I cloned the Git repository. I created a namespace. Then I created a role. Then I have deployed my ingress controller by using daemon set strategy. So there are two strategies available to deploy the ingress controller in the Kubernetes cluster. One is a deployment strategy. Another one is a daemon set strategy. I'm using daemon set strategy. So it created my ingress controller. So now once the ingress controller is created, we can see all the details and we can create a load balancer. My load balancer also created. Once the load balancer is created, can we see a DNS name generated for that? This is the load balancer of our application or this load balancer of ingress controller.
Ingress
Guys,
controller.
this load balancer is for our application or this load balancer is for our ingress controller.
Ingress controller.
Ingress controller.
This
Ingress
load balancer
controller.
is belongs to ingress controller. Now I need to map my application details to this ingress controller. Okay, so you can map your application with the two domain names, subdomains we can use. So I will configure a domain name like this, but this is not recommended approach. Multi DNS configuration is not the recommended approach. I'm going to configure path based routing. So there will be only one domain. There will be only one domain. If the request is coming with a Java web app, it should go to this service. If request is coming with the Maven web app, it should go to the second service. Now, first let me map this domain name to the ingress load balancer. So ingress is available. For ingress, there is a load balancer. So now domain name will be mapped to load balancer of ingress. Then ingress rules I am going to create. So I'm going to map this load balancer to my domain. Guys, once again, I'm repeating. This is a load balancer. This load balancer belongs to our application or this load balancer belongs to ingress controller.
Ingress controller.
Ingress controller. Now let's go to Route 53. Let's go to Route 53 in the AWS. Domain name is available. Let's go here. Let's go here. Go to hosted zone. In the hosted zone, do we have any record for the domain currently? No. Let's create one record. I'm giving the alias endpoint as my load balancer, region Mumbai. In the Mumbai region, there is a load balancer. Okay, now create record. So my domain name is mapped to ingress load balancer. My domain name is mapped to ingress load balancer. Good. Let's wait. My domain name is mapped to ingress load balancer.
Sir, here we can create our domain names also, right, sir?
Yeah, we can create whatever you want.
Yes, sir. I tried to create in the host on different domain names, but Tomcat, to hit the Tomcat, we will give IP address and port number, but in the IP address space, just I have given tomcat.dev, but I have given the port number, sir. So how to hide that port number for the Tomcat?
We will come to that. Okay. Right. Now, guys, here my domain name is mapped. So can we access our domain name? Will it display anything for us? Currently, what it is displaying?
Not from.
Currently, what it is displaying now? 404. So what I have done, domain name is mapped to ingress or domain name is mapped to ingress load balancer.
Ingress load balancer.
Yeah, domain name is mapped to ingress load balancer. When I send a request to the domain, what's happening? The request is going to ingress load balancer.
Yes.
Does this ingress knows which request should go to which service in the cluster?
No.
It don't know. How
We
many
need to
services are
configure.
there in the cluster?
2
These-
services.
Now in the
One.
diagram there are 3, but in our cluster how many services are available?
2.
One.
Two services.
We have one service, huh?
2 service.
2.
2 services are there. What are the 2 services?
Java Web
Java
Apps,
Java
Web
Web
App,
App,
Java Web
and
App and Maven Web
Then
App.
web app.
Java Web App and Maven Web App, 2 services are available.
Yeah.
And ingress controller is deployed. Ingress object is deployed to my cluster. What is the main purpose of ingress? Why we are using ingress? Why we configured ingress here? Guys, why we configured ingress here?
Route the suitable
Traffic. Route the traffic. Now people will use what? People will use my domain name. So when the
Yes.
people use my domain name, a request will come. Whenever a request comes to the cluster, ingress is going to receive the request. Ingress should forward the request to particular
services.
service. So here we need to do path-based routing. What should we do now?
Path-based
Based
routing.
routing.
Path-based routing. Okay. So what I will tell to my ingress is my ingress load balancer is available, guys. So there is a ingress load balancer. Ingress load balancer is available. Now I will tell that if a path is Java Web App, if a path is a Java Web App, go to Java Web App service. Go to Java Web App service. Is this correct now?
Yes, sir.
If a path is /Maven Web App, then it should go to which service?
Maven Web
Maven
Apps
Web App.
Maven Web App service.
service.
Okay. This is my ingress load balancer. Now this ingress load balancer is mapped to whom? My
Domain.
domain. What is my domain name? It is
Ashok
ashokit.org. So here, whenever you send a request to the ashokit.org, it will come to the load balancer. In the load balancer, I am configuring my routings. So if you hit the URL as ashokit.org/Java Web App, it will go to
Java Web App
Java web app
service.
service.
it will go to Java Web App service. ashokit.org/Java Web App. Tomorrow, when we make e-commerce application, I will give this as a mobiles. I will give this as a clothes. I will give this as a sports. Like this, we can give that. ashokit.org Java Web App should go to this service. You understand? Final user is going to give this URL. It should go to this service. When user is typing in the browser ashokit.org/Maven Web App, typing it as a Maven Web App, then I'm going to route this request to, I'm going to route this request from here to here. This request should go to this service. So who is taking care of this path-based routing in the cluster now? Who is taking care of path-based routing in the cluster? Ingress. Who is taking care of this, guys?
Ingress.
Ingress. So now you understand the purpose of ingress in the Kubernetes cluster.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So in the cluster, we are going to run multiple services. One service can have multiple pods also. That is a different story. So there is one clothes, there is one hotel service. There is a flight service. There is a train service. Like this, if you make my trip application, flight service is running, hotel service is running, train service is running. When a request comes from the domain request will go to ingress load balancer. Ingress load balancer will divert the request to the particular service running in the cluster based on the path mapping. Okay, in order to do that path mapping, we need to create one ingress rule file. Okay, so we need to create one ingress rule file. Now path-based routing we are going to do. Guys, see here in this root file, what is the host name I am configuring to the ingress controller? What I am telling, what is my host name? What is my domain name?
Ashokit.org.
ashokit.org is my domain name. What is the path I am telling? If a path is /Java-Web App, it should go to Web App service. If the path name is Maven Web App, it should go to Maven Web App service. These are ingress controller rules. What is the type of the kind of manifest? This manifest kind is ingress.
Ingress.
So now I'm telling to this ingress rule file, the domain name is ashokid.org. With this domain, if a request comes with this path as a prefix, then it should go to Java Web App Service. With this domain, if request comes with the URL pattern as a Maven Web App, it should go to Maven Web App Service. This is Java Web App Service and Maven Web App Services are running as a node port services. Are they running as a cluster IP services?
Cluster IP services.
Cluster IP services. Cluster IP services means can you access the services outside directly?
No,
No.
only
No.
inside.
Only inside the cluster we can
Cluster.
access. Where is my ingress running? Ingress is inside the cluster or ingress is outside the cluster? Ingress is inside the cluster or ingress is outside the cluster?
Inside cluster.
Inside the cluster.
Inside the cluster. Can ingress access my Kubernetes services now?
Yes.
Yes.
But outside people can access directly or outside people cannot access directly?
Cannot access.
Cannot
directly.
Cannot access directly. Outside people have only one option. They need to use my domain.
Yes.
When they send a request to my domain, domain request will go to ingress load balancer. So in the ingress load balancer, I have configured the domain mapping. So whenever a request comes to the ingress controller will check the ingress rules. What are the ingress rules I have configured here? What are the ingress rules I have configured? With this domain, if a request comes with Java Web App, it should go to this service. If a request comes with this URL pattern, it should go to this service. These two are the cluster IP services in my Kubernetes. Are you clear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now let me take this file. All magic is in the YMLs only, guys. Ingress rules.yml. Ingress rules.yml. You understand what is the purpose of this rule file? Guys, you understand what is the purpose of this rule file?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
kubectl apply -y ingress rules.yml. Ingress rules.yml. I configured my rules. Now let's check it. kubectl get all. You can see that pods are running, services are running, deployments are running, replica sets also running. Very good. kubectl get pods. My pods also are running. Let's test it. Is the ingress is working or not? ashokid.org/Java web app. Is it diverting to the Java web application? Is the traffic is diverted to Java web application?
Yes,
Guys,
sir.
come on.
Yes.
Yes.
Now let me send you a request with another path. What is another path I have configured in the rule file?
Maven Web
Maven
App.
Web App.
And web app.
Maven web app. Maven web app. Is Maven web app going to another application now? Another service is executing.
Yes.
Java web app is executing. Maven web app is executing. My domain name is same, but why two applications are getting, two services are executing with the single domain? How two services are executing?
By
Ingress.
ingress.
URL pattern. What type of routing I am doing by using ingress now? What type of routing I am doing by using ingress now?
Path-based route.
Path based routing. Here LBR is available and here route rules are available. Within the ingress, I have created a load balancer and I'm giving the rules. Okay. So now for this, I'm giving this as a hotels. Assume that in future, we will make it as a hotels URL. This one, I will make it as a trains URL mapping. Okay. This is trains application. This one, I will make it as a flights application. I will make it as a flights application. Now you understand how Make My Trip is running. When you click on flights, flight service will execute in the cluster. When you click on the trains, train service will execute. When you click on hotels, hotel service will execute. So with this, I hope you got the clarity. What is ingress in the Kubernetes? Got my point?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
How to create the domains? That is the question.
How to create in the AWS at Route 53, you have a registered domain option. You have to pay the money for that.
Can you show us how to do that?
Yep. So if you go to Route 53, there is an option called register domains. Okay. So there is an option register a domain. You choose the domain, you check the extension you want, you can click on continue and you can purchase it. You got?
Okay, it is mandatory. It is mandatory to take the domain.
If you want to test all these functionalities, then domain is required. If you want to practice everything, then domain is required. You create one domain, it is a $5 rupees, man. $5, not rupees, it is $5.
Yeah. Hi guys. So I hope you understood what is ingress controller. Anybody having any questions, you can unmute and you can ask me.
Sir,
Hello.
Java Web App is a name of image or it is a path?
Image name is there and I have given as a path also. You can give
Okay,
anything.
okay.
So basically,
What is different?
let me tell you, whenever our application having multiple microservices, those microservices will be deployed in the backend. For the microservices, the routing will be configured in the ingress controller. We don't want to expose our services to the end users, right? Our services will be deployed as a cluster IP in the backend. Only the traffic which is coming from outside will go to ingress. Ingress will route the traffic to the services in the cluster. Outside a traffic map to inside services in the cluster by using ingress.
Sir, GoDaddy.com or Route53, we can say is the ingress control.
No, we can't say that. In the GoDaddy, they will create the CNAME records will be created in the GoDaddy. They don't use ingress control. Ingress control is a Kubernetes concept. In the GoDaddy, whatever the domain you purchase for your domain, CNAME records will be available. We need to map them.
So which type of load balancer it creates?
So by default, it will create a classic load balancer, but which got outdated. Now they will increase to, they will change it to application load balancer.
Ashok, once we were using a load port and load balancer service in the service manifest file,
Yep.
we were able to access the URL, right?
Right.
And here also we are doing the same. I think eventually we are doing the same thing, right? Because internally, of course, we are.
Yeah. Earlier, same thing we are doing, but in the real time, we don't deploy application as a node port or load balancer. No? We don't want the people to access our services directly. Backend microservices will be available. So do you deploy your microservices with load balancer? Do you want outside people to access your microservices directly?
But I'm sorry to say, but I'm a bit confused because, still they are able to access it, right? Because if suppose they have a website like Flipkart or whatever, you're saying hotel and make my trip. Okay, so they are able to access it, right?
Anshman, the thing is, you are accessing Flipkart. You are hitting the Flipkart to backend URL, or you are using Flipkart UI. UI is separate, backend is separate. UI application you can access. UI application you can access. When you perform some operation on the UI application will access the backend application. You are not directly accessing the backend application.
Got it. Thank you.
Ashok, what is the main purpose of ingress? The difference between load balancer and ingress.
Load balancer URL is directly accessible outside the cluster. Whenever you deploy one service by using load balancer URL, anybody can use, anybody can access our application. But by using ingress, we will divert the traffic to the services inside the cluster. Outside people cannot access our services directly. We don't want outside people to access our services directly. Suppose if I deploy my application as a load balancer, then what will happen? Can you access my application with the load balancer URL? Yes, you can do that.
Yes,
I don't want to do that. I don't want to allow that. Then I will deploy my services by using cluster IP. Any request which is coming from the UI application will go to ingress. Ingress will decide for which request, which Kubernetes service should be executed. That is the main purpose. It is routing purpose.
Sir, as you
So
said, like it will be
we'll
creating a classic load balancer.
load balancer in the front
So
end and later ingress.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
sir, as you said, like it will be creating a classic load balancer, and but if we create it today, it will be creating an application load balancer, correct?
Correct.
But in that case, sir, since we will be using your repository clone, so is it updated clone, or like it will have that classic load balancer only?
No. Load balancer, we don't specify any load balancer type there. By default, it will choose the latest load balancer. Even if you use my repository also, the load balancer will be decided by the AWS.
Okay. Yeah.
Which load balancer it has to create will be decided by the AWS.
Oh, okay. Great.
Ashok, this is Nagarjuna. So
Yeah,
normally AWS, we have three types of IP addresses available. One is the private IP address, public IP address, and elastic IP address. So whenever we are going to create the load balancing, either we can configure the elastic IP also whenever domain creation aggressive or situation.
Elastic IP not required. For load balancer, a separate DNS URL will be generated. Now, why you need elastic IP for that?
Okay. So elastic IP we can accessing through the public base, correct?
That is different, sir. In the AWS class, currently we are not using any elastic IP.
Okay.
It's not required because when you go for load balancer URL itself is generated. With that URL, we are accessing elastic IP. If you don't want to change the public IP of your machine, then you will go for elastic IP. That is AWS topic.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hi.
So, sir, can you explain that API version in the latest YML file which you used?
Sure. I will tell that, sir. Yeah.
Okay. And sir, one more question, like the difference between load balancer and ingress. So ingress, we are just restricting access to like particular services, right? That
No.
service we need to access.
No, man. The thing is, I have 10 services in the backend. 10 services I am running by using cluster IP. Why I am going for cluster IP?
Inside the cluster access.
Those services should be accessible only inside the cluster. Outside people should not access. That's why I'm running by using cluster IP. Now, my UI application will be accessible outside. My UI application should access the backend services. UI application also will run in the cluster. My backend services also will run in the cluster. Whenever request comes from the UI, which request should be handled by which service in the cluster, that will be decided by ingress.
Yes, that's
Okay, ingress is the mediator between the front end and back end.
Okay, so outside the cluster.
Just like API, sir. Ingress is just like acting like an API between the user request and
Ingress is acting as a mediator between front end application and back end services.
Okay,
so that means that like the backend and like database applications will be deployed as node using the cluster IP services.
Cluster for database, there will not be any URLs, right? Database will be only one.
Yes, sir.
So for database, ingress is not required. For backend services, but that ingress is required.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So Ashok, generally, so this ingress with the cluster IP is recommended for general projects in the real time.
Backend services with the cluster IP recommended. That is the way that we will follow.
Okay, backend services.
Yeah, backend, I mean to say microservices.
Okay, yeah, got it.
So, sir, like if we have like few services and if we don't want all the services to be accessible outside, so that we can do with ingress?
Yes, that is the main reason of going for ingress. Ingress is basically routing purpose.
Okay, we can restrict some services to the outside the cluster.
Right.
Okay.
Hi, so this is Pradeep here. Except path rules, it is supporting some other rules also.
Yeah, so mainly we are going to use the path-based rules here. Other rules also available. So I have given two options, right? I have used path-based routing.
And apart from that, what are the rules? That means except path rules.
1 minute, let me show you that as well. Yes, it is missing in the document. I will update that. Path-based routing and another one, I forgot the name. I'm not recalling. I will send that in the notes.
Okay, so that is also used mostly.
Yeah,
not?
mainly path-based routing will be used because for which URL pattern, which service should be called, that will be decided by path.
Okay, and one thing more, as I have seen, there is a HTTP request. So HTTP request only from front end we can raise.
Correct.
But yes, that means it will be used only for front end, not when we are calling the backend services. There we cannot use the HTTP, no?
No.
Okay.
So from the front end application request will come. That request will go to my Ingress load balancer. My domain name is mapped to Ingress. Na? Front end application will access my domain name. It will go to Ingress. Ingress will check what is the URL pattern. For that URL pattern in the cluster, which service is mapped, that Kubernetes cluster service is going to execute. In that service, our pods will be available.
Okay, that means Ingress will sense that HTTP request, and on the basis of that, it will call the backend services.
Yes, backend services, correct.
Okay.
So your front end directly call, your front end application cannot access the backend directly. Your front end application request will go to Ingress. Ingress will call the backend.
Okay, and HTTP will be used only when we are calling from front end, not
end,
inside the
backend.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Ashok?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi, good morning. This is we are using HTTP. That how to convert the HTTP to HTTPS here?
SSL certificates are in the Route 53 for the domain. We need to add the SSL certificate. In the AWS classes, we will understand.
Yeah, okay. It is no. We have to get a SSL certificate. You put it in a Ingress or somewhere.
No. For the domain, we will put that SSL certificate.
Yeah, okay. And also one more. We have to create this is for public domain. We want to internal services. Internal domain. How to create?
Subdomains will be there in the Route 50.
Okay.
So now if you go for any company, TCS.com.
But
in the TCS, hr.tcs.com subportal will be available.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, the subdomains we can create in the main domain.
Yeah, based on environment, we have to create that one internal domain. Right?
Yes, right. That load balancer will be mapped to that internal domain, subdomains.
Yeah, okay. That also created in AWS or it is in some other DNS?
If you are using AWS cloud in the Route 53, we can create it.
Okay. How to create that in a DNS via?
Yeah, that is AWS topic, sir. In the Route 53, you will understand that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fine, guys. Good. Thanks for attending the session today. I will upload this Ingress notes. So please, if you have a domain, you can practice that. Thank you. We'll see you in the tomorrow's class.